Welcome to Conspiracist.
Great to be here.
Today we're examining a pretty compelling, though certainly unconventional historical idea, the existence of the forgotten emperors.
Right.
This hypothesis essentially suggests a deliberate, systematic concealment of evidence about certain Roman emperors, basically removing them from the history books we all know.
It's a fascinating premise.
Our aim in this deep dive is really to objectively evaluate the reasoning, the thinking behind it, and any potential indicators cited for this claim. We'll be keeping it strictly professional, analytical.
Absolutely. The whole concept of a large-scale historical erasure, especially of figures as significant as Roman emperors, it certainly makes you think.
It does.
It pushes us to consider, well, what mechanisms, what motivations could possibly drive something like that? And, what traces might still be left behind?
Exactly. Let's start there with the why. If this hypothesis holds any water, what would be the main motivations for, say, governments or other powerful groups to make these emperors vanish from history?
Well, proponents often point towards political expediency. That's usually the primary driver mentioned.
Okay.
Imagine a situation where a specific emperor's rule was seen as problematic. Maybe there was instability or deeply unpopular policies, perhaps even a disputed claim to the throne.
Right. Something inconvenient for later rulers.
Precisely. Subsequent regimes might find it advantageous to just erase that emperor's memory entirely. It helps bolster their own legitimacy.
Makes sense.
It lets them present a cleaner, more favorable historical line. By, editing the past, they solidify their own power in the present.
So it's fundamentally about shaping that narrative of who rightfully holds power. Are there other suggested reasons beyond the purely political?
Religious factors could theoretically play a part too, perhaps more subtly in the Roman context compared to, say, later European history, but still possible.
Wow.
If a forgotten emperor held religious beliefs or pushed policies that really clashed with the dominant religious views that eventually shaped how history was written, well, removing them could help reinforce a particular religious orthodoxy.
Presenting a more unified religious past.
Exactly. Think about the power struggles between different belief systems throughout history. A suppressed historical figure, especially an emperor, could really complicate a carefully constructed religious narrative.
That's an interesting angle, the interplay between political and ideological control. And underpinning all of this, I suppose, is the control of information itself.
That's the core of it, really. The power to control the historical narrative is immense. By selectively leaving out or downplaying certain figures, certain events, those in control can really shape collective memory, push specific ideologies, and limit, dissenting views.
Which brings us to the really tricky part, evidence.
Yes.
How do you find evidence for something supposedly erased? What kinds of indicators could possibly be offered?
That's where it gets very nuanced, as you say. Direct proof is, by definition, elusive if the erasure was successful.
So what do they look for?
Arguments often center on perceived anomalies, maybe inconsistencies within the existing historical record we do have.
Okay.
A common approach in these kinds of theories is the reinterpretation of established facts or artifacts. We see this kind of thing in other fringe theories, too, like those questioning if the Roman Empire even existed.
Right, which often involves misinterpreting genuine evidence, doesn't it?
Exactly. Taking something real but twisting its meaning. And it's so important to remember that just because we don't have the evidence we might expect, that doesn't automatically prove a cover-up. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence, as the saying goes.
A crucial logical point. So reinterpretation is one avenue. How else might existing historical materials be used to argue for these forgotten emperors?
Well, you might hear claims about historical forgeries or alterations to documents.
Tempering.
Yes. If you find instances where historical texts seem fragmented or maybe contradictory, or if there are even faint suggestions of tampering, these could be frowned as deliberate attempts to hide information about these lost emperors.
But proving that kind of ancient forgery must be incredibly hard.
Exceptionally difficult. We have methodologies, of course, for analyzing the authenticity of physical things, like art or coins, but applying those definitively to ancient texts to prove deliberate alteration. It requires rigorous analysis, and often the conclusions are, well, less than certain.
So the bar for proving that kind of manipulation is set very, very high. What about physical stuff? Buildings, artifacts? Could unusual structures be pointed to?
That's another angle sometimes taken. You see it in theories like the Tartarian Empire idea, where existing architectural style star forts, classical buildings, are claimed as evidence of a suppressed advanced civilization.
Hmm.
Similarly, for forgotten emperors, proponents might point to certain Roman-era structures or artifacts that they feel are maybe poorly understood or don't quite fit the standard timeline.
Suggesting they belong to these erased rulers.
That would be the implication. But it's vital to measure those interpretations against the vast body of established knowledge about Roman engineering, architecture, dating methods, all based on extensive, verifiable research.
Which leads us nicely into thinking about historical knowledge itself. It's not static, is it? Our understanding is constantly being refined.
Absolutely not static. Historical understanding is a dynamic process.
Yeah.
It evolves. New archaeological finds pop up. We get new ways to analyze texts. We reinterpret existing sources.
So historical revisionism happens all the time.
It does, and it's a normal, necessary part of scholarship. It's usually uncontroversial, just refining the picture based on better evidence or new perspectives.
Okay, so how do we draw the line? How do we distinguish between that legitimate evidence-based revision and a theory proposing a deliberate conspiratorial erasure? What's the key difference?
The fundamental difference lies in the evidence and the methodology. Legitimate historical revision is driven by new evidence, or a more robust analysis of existing evidence, all within the framework of established scholarly methods: verification, peer review, contextualization.
Right.
Conspiracy theories, on the other hand, often lack credible positive evidence. They might rely heavily on speculation, on picking out anomalies while ignoring contradictory data, and dismissing mainstream consensus without, frankly, a good reason backed by solid proof.
And there's sometimes that element of sticking to sources that only confirm the belief.
Yes, what some researchers call a crippled epistemology, where individuals might limit their exposure only to information that supports the theory, creating a kind of echo chamber.
It seems intuitive, though, that if you present someone with clear facts contradicting a theory or show the lack of solid evidence, they'd question it.
Generally, yes. Presenting factual inaccuracies or logical flaws clearly can often lead people to reconsider those kinds of beliefs. But sometimes, if a belief is very deeply held, or if the theory aligns strongly with someone's overall worldview, it can be harder for contradictory evidence to break through. That's just human psychology.
Let's step back slightly. Even without assuming a massive conspiracy to erase emperors, can powerful groups still influence our view of the past?
Oh, unquestionably. That happens all the time, and it's well documented by historians.
How does that work?
Well, think about who gets to write history, or whose records are preserved. Throughout history, those in power have often shaped the recording and interpretation of events. Power dynamics influence which sources survive, whose stories get told, and whose perspectives are marginalized or simply silenced.
So gaps or biases can appear naturally just through who held the pen or controlled the archives.
Exactly. Nationalistic agendas, cultural biases, these can lead to skewed histories, emphasizing certain achievements while downplaying failures or inconvenient truths. History writing is rarely completely neutral.
So, even without an active plot, the historical record can have its silences. Given all this, why do you think ideas like forgotten emperors, these grand historical cover-ups, capture the imagination? What's the appeal?
There's definitely a psychological element. Conspiracy theories often arise from a basic human need to find explanations for big, confusing events, especially when the official explanation seems maybe too simple or inadequate.
Right.
Research actually shows that for major events where the apparent cause seems small compared to the impact, belief in alternative, often conspiratorial explanations tends to go up.
Like people feel there must be more to the story.
Precisely. These theories can provide a sense of understanding, sometimes even a feeling of control, by attributing events to the hidden, intentional actions of powerful groups. And, there's just a natural human curiosity, a tendency to question what we're told and look for hidden meanings.
It's searching for a bigger explanation, perhaps a more dramatic one. Okay, but bringing it back specifically to the forgotten emperors idea, does this hypothesis actually find any support within mainstream historical scholarship?
That's a really crucial point to make clear. No, the hypothesis of intentionally concealed Roman emperors is not supported by mainstream historical scholarship.
Okay.
Our understanding of Roman history is built on an enormous, interconnected web of evidence. We're talking archaeology, texts from many different places and perspectives, coins, inscriptions, art. It all tends to corroborate the established timeline and figures.
It's a complex picture built over centuries of study.
It is. And when we do find someone previously unknown, like the Emperor Seleucus, who was identified primarily from a couple of coins,
Right, I remember reading about that.
that discovery happened through standard historical and numismatic methods. It shows the process of discovery works, but it wasn't uncovering some vast conspiracy. It was filling a small gap using conventional scholarship.
That's a great example of how history actually evolves through careful finds, not grand reveals of suppressed plots. So, to be absolutely clear, our discussion here has been purely an objective look at the hypothesis itself. We are not endorsing it.
Exactly. The goal was simply to explore the reasoning, the potential arguments one might encounter for such a theory, and critically evaluate them using the principles of sound historical methodology.
So we've reached the end of our deep dive on this idea of concealed forgotten emperors. We've looked at the why, the potential motivations like political control. We've discussed how the types of evidence proponents might point to, like reinterpreted artifacts or alleged forgeries, and the immense difficulty in proving such claims. We stress the importance of critical evaluation, avoiding logical pitfalls like absence of evidence. We also talked about the difference between legitimate historical updates based on new finds and theories lacking solid proof.
And the influence of power on any historical narrative, even without conspiracy.
Right. Plus, the psychological reasons why these kinds of grand theories might resonate with some people. And, crucially, we noted the lack of support for this specific forgotten emperor's idea within the academic historical community. It really underscores the need for rigorous evidence when assessing any claim about the past.
And perhaps one final thought for you to consider is just the sheer scale of what would be required to completely erase multiple emperors from history across the entire span of the Roman Empire, with all its record-keeping, coinage, inscriptions, and diverse provinces. The logistical challenge of such a cover-up, ensuring no trace remained, would be, well, almost unimaginably vast.
Thanks for listening to Conspiracist.